Welcome to a new episode where we're finally going to put an LS drivetrain into the gremlin. So the first thing I think would be wise to do on this is obviously pull out the 6-cylinder and drivetrain, but probably get the hood off. I'm thinking about taking the fenders off to make it a little easier to get around and do the swap. And then probably gonna try to clean out some of this before I make the car to where it can't be driven under its own power here for a while. And that's the other thing too. If you're gonna be doing LS swaps and stuff, it's always good to make sure you have a good clean spot where the car can sit on jack stands, because it could take 30 days to 6 months to do it. I mean, it depends on how motivated you are, but my goal is to try to at least have this up and running, 30 to 60 days. Hopefully be able to drive it a little bit before the snow starts flying. That's the goal. So we'll start tearing into it, and I'll make videos as I go, and hopefully we can get the sloppy 8, as we're going to call it, up and running with minimum issues, and have a V8 gremlin. Well, first we'll start by removing the hood hinges, which is 4 bolts. And then we'll start removing all the parts off the motor that are going to keep it from coming out of the car. Motor mounts, transmission mount, cross member, radiator hoses, radiator, etc. Whatever it takes to get it out quick and easy without taking too much time. With the engine out, we can look at making some motor mounts and getting this 4.8 stuffed into the car. And this is the original 4.8 that started the AMX project. This is known as the Sloppy 8 project because that's what it is. Every used sloppy lifter, pushrod, camshaft that I have laying around is going into this 4.8, including these 5.3 sloppy heads sitting on my 6-liter engine. Making the motor mounts was pretty simple. I just mocked up some 1/8 inch 6x6 chunks of steel and reinforced them and welded them to my already made V8 AMC motor mount brackets, and took the original 6-cylinder rubber motor mounts and spliced them into the whole works. I dug out the old 4L60E I had that was in running condition when I bought the drivetrain, and went ahead and bolted it up to the 4.8. That way I could get it into the car, get the motor mounts on it, and hopefully start building a transmission cross member. They're not pretty, but here's kind of an idea of what the motor mounts look like. I did end up having to alter them a little bit more further on in the project, but pretty close to how they were, and I did trim them up and clean them up some. With the motor mounts bolted to the engine block and the transmission attached, is ready to test fit into the gremlin and see how tough would this project really be. Surprisingly, the engine fit in pretty good along with the transmission. Moving on to the front of the engine, I put the timing chain, but I did have to buy a new oil pump. Be sure to shim those or they will not work. Here's the head bolts. I've gone over this before. You turn them 90 degrees, and the best way to do it is to put a mark in the center, do 90 degrees in this specific order, and then do 90 degrees one more time. And then your line should be at the bottom. Moving on to the wiring harness, It's not as hard as it looks. It's just time consuming. It took me about 3 hours to make the wiring harness. If you go to lt1swap.com, you can find everything you need to know about making your own wiring harness. I mounted the computer where the battery usually sits, and I did take the battery tray and swap it off to the passenger side. There's already pre-drilled holes from the factory, so it made it really super easy. The motor was coming along pretty good at this point. I even went to the junkyard and got a junkyard intake. It's amazing what you can buy at the junkyard for under $10. I bought all my spark plug wires, O2 sensors, and a few other sensors. Using the factory LS throttle cable was pretty easy too. I just had to cut my throttle pedal and add an adjustable bolt to it to raise the height up 2.5 inches as seen in this picture. My oil sending unit's mechanical, and I just took the factory one, drilled it out, used a tap, and then added in my brass insert fitting. It works good this way. That way I know I'm at least getting a mechanical reading. Besides that, I'm not much into putting electronic displays into any of my cars. But you just thread it right back into the original spot, hook up your nylon tube, and you're ready to go. Don't forget to check your intake ports. This could have been a catastrophic failure, but as I was getting ready to clean the cylinder heads, I happened to eyeball down them to check for debris and found this bolt. It's also good to blow out all your cylinder ports too with some compressed air to just get everything out of there before you put your intake on for the final time. Ready to put the intake on for the final time, hopefully. I did notch the firewall where the windshield wiper motor goes, but turns out I didn't have to. With the motor looking more and more complete, everything was going together smoothly at this point. But then came time to do the exhaust. It wasn't too terribly hard. The driver's side went on really easily, which I was told. Most people had a hard time clearing the steering column, but the passenger side got interesting really quickly. But I managed to get it all built. The exhaust system's going to be pretty good, I believe, on the Gremlin. We're not making a race car, so I'm not too worried about all the hammering I had to do on the driver's side to get it to fit. Alright, well, if you've been watching the video, then you've already kind of got the gist of it. But I thought I'd just make a video of what's done so far in this video anyways. The last part, or last thing I've done is the exhaust for the most part. They're pretty tight, but they do work. This one here I had to bash in with the hammer just a little bit, but it's tough to tell, but it's got a good 1/8 inch or so before it even touches the steering column. So that's good. And things I probably didn't really explain too well are the power steering situation. This is a manual steering box, thank goodness, because even if I wanted to put a steering pump in here, it would never fit because it would actually just hit that. And I don't know what the power steering unit would be like for it, so just going to be a manual steering box, and to get around the belt situation, I just got the biggest plastic pulley I had laying around and stuck them on here, and already got myself a belt measurement, which I can go get a belt pretty easily for it. I didn't put it here because, you know, all that holds this on is this little bit of pot metal or aluminum cast right here, so I figured that could probably be a risk of breaking, so I stuck it over here where it's nice and rigid and it's got a lot of stuff going on. The throttle cable, I showed some of it, but it does work fully. You push the gas pedal all the way to the floor, that opens all the way up with no binding or anything. And this is the LS drive cable. So I just drilled a hole about 2.5 inches up. And the reason I had to do that is because, well, the valve cover and everything's in the way. And then I extended my gas pedal, as you've probably seen earlier in the clip show. And then I did my oil pressure just using the factory oil thing and drilling it out and stuffing the mechanical oil nylon line in there and all that good stuff. I notched that out thinking I was going to have to, but I didn't have to, so oh well. And then on the AMX and previous times, I never hooked up this venting, this 4-corner vent system. Well, I did have it hooked up, but not to the throttle body. And you know, from what I've been read up on and been told, that's just to keep the throttle body from freezing in the cold weather and sticking on you. But we might actually drive this gremlin in the cold weather a little bit, so I am going to run the water through the throttle body, and that's going to come over into this guy here. And then the heater hose is just hook up normally onto this thing, and then I got to do the lower radiator hose still. This is the single core 6-cylinder radiator, which may or may not work. I may have to stick a different radiator in, but we'll find out. We're a little ways from radiator overheating still, but passenger side header wasn't too bad, although I did have to make a pretty schwanky header, which worked out okay, I think. Get you under here so you can see a little better. But he comes out right here, and then my downpipe just goes like that and runs right down. No problem, doesn't stick any lower than the oil pan, which, you know, oil pan sticks down a couple inches, but believe it or not, this is the same oil pan, and well, this is the original 4.8 that the AMX started with, and we drove a year with this oil pan hanging down, and we actually scraped it a few times. Right there, you can see where we scraped it pretty good. Doesn't leak, but surprisingly, I've had this gremlin on the ground and the shocks are wore out, but I can jump up and down and it gets nowhere. It doesn't even hardly squat down. I think the 6-cylinder I pulled out was heavier than this LS, but I don't know that for sure, but it sure does seem like it to me. Anyways, and then the driver's side header was easy enough to build. That's loose, it's not tightened all the way up. When it's tightened up, it'll be level, and then run the exhaust down that side. Transmission cross member was actually really simple on this 4L60E. Basically, you just drill a hole right there, and this is a factory transmission mount for the 2-wheel drive truck that this came out of originally, and slam, right there he goes. I gotta finish hooking up my wiring harness to the transmission, which is simple enough. But and then when I was building my wiring harness, I just didn't really look into this too thoroughly, but I don't need any of that, so I'll just cut it and cap it. And then this is actually the O2 sensor, the front O2 sensor for the driver's side, and it needs to get swapped over there. There's the passenger one there. But all in all, real easy. My motor mounts aren't anything to be proud of, but they'll get the job done. I gotta replace these rubber things before we start driving too far. And the starter will come out really easily. It doesn't touch the header. Close, but doesn't touch it. And it actually comes out and in and out pretty easy. So I won't have to remove the header. Even with this exhaust pipe on here, I already have built it, tried it, and I can get it in and out. No problems. Same with the oil filter on this side. It's not gonna have any clearance issues or anything with the header. But it's coming out to be pretty easy. The drive line, I may have to go get one made, but I think I got a trick up my sleeve, and you'll have to wait until the second video to see that. So the worst part, let's get this focused. The worst thing I had to do to the poor gremlin, but I already mentioned this on these 4L60Es. So you have to cut a hole, and you have to. Not because of anything, but because of that servo right there. You can't get the engine or anything to line up with that servo like that. But it gives it easy access to get to the transmission cooler lines. And I'll just build a nice little box of stick over that, and I'll just glue it in with some right stuff and some sheet metal screws so I can take it back apart if I got to in the future to do stuff to it. And then obviously I moved the battery from over there to over here. And then this is the truck computer box, which has a funky plastic thing on it. I actually cut it off flush. You can kind of see some of my hack job right there, but I cut it down to where it's nice and flush, and it actually fits in pretty good there. I used a couple self-tappers, you can see one right there, and put them to the body. So all that's going to work out good. My 6-place fuse holder for the LS, and then since the gremlin isn't all hacked up like the AMX was, it's going to be easy to wire all this stuff together. There's my actual starter wire to the LS. So all in all, pretty easy. Just waiting on fuel pump, and yeah, it's really kind of. Oh, I'm waiting on the shifter. I got the same style shifter that's in the AMX. So I'm waiting on the shifter, the fuel pump, and I can go get all the belt and the rest of the little small things I need. I've got the fittings to do the fuel system, which this one's going to be a little bit different than the AMX, but still the same principle. So, well, anyways, appreciate you guys watching. If anybody's going to take on a gremlin LS swap, I hope this helps you out in your adventure. And I think this will kind of apply to Hornets and any of the small body AMCs. And I know a lot of you, quite a few of you asked me what kind of exhaust I was going to use before I ever got my headers in, and I just said block huggers, and a couple of you wrote me and said those aren't going to work, and you tried them, but these are the dirt cheapest Chinese made $70 shipped to my door block hugger LS headers, and I had to modify this one some, but I already knew I was going to have to. But other than that, I had to bash that in right there just a little bit. I didn't have to do anything to the driver's side to clear the steering column. So, and then the motor's nice and straight, and this is a little crooked, but the motor sits nice and level and nice and centered in the car. So everything worked out good on that. But well, hopefully I can get another video out here in a couple of weeks, and I'm hoping part 2 is just going to be it running and driving. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm hoping to have this up and running before July. Obviously they canceled Bonneville Salt Flats this year, so that's why I'm throwing my attention and time into the gremlin. I wasn't going to do this until this winter, but get it done now and go back and pull the motor out if I want this winter and put the right type of oil pan and clean it up and do some painting in there and get her looking a little nicer. But till the next video, thanks for watching.